This is the GardenDC podcast, the podcast about everything gardening in the Washington, D.C. and Mid-Atlantic region. I'm your host, Kathy Jentz. I'm the editor of Washington Gardener magazine. Our content is aimed at gardening enthusiasts, people who grow everything from edibles to ornamentals, natives to exotics. If it grows in our area, that's what we talk about. Welcome to episode 202 of the GardenDC podcast. In this episode, we talk with filmmaker Cynthia Khabib about her garden-related documentaries. The plant profile is on portulaca, and we share what's going on in the garden, as well as some upcoming local gardening events and this week's garden tasks in the What's New segment. We close out with the last word on flower power for your veggie patch from Christy Page of GreenPrints. This episode, we're joined by returning guest Carol Allen. She is our insect index columnist for Washington Gardener magazine, but she wears many other hats aside from that. She is an all-around plantswoman and horticulturalist and ISAA arborist. I think I am correct in saying that, Carol?
Yeah, you're correct. I stay pretty busy.
Yep, she is one busy lady, so we are happy to have her. And one of the many hats you wear, Carol, is as a newsletter producer for the University of Maryland system about food safety for farmers.
Mm-hmm.
And could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. So, Kathy, I'm actually officially an agent associate in food safety with the University of Maryland. And our group publishes a weekly newsletter, comes out at 6 a.m. every Monday morning with original articles about basically food safety issues with fresh produce. So fresh produce, we're concentrating on fruits and vegetables that are typically eaten raw. So that's everything from the root vegetable carrot to raspberries to greens to tomatoes and all of that. And we just stay on top of the federal laws. We stay on top of the Maryland certificates, the different things that our produce farmers have to deal with when it comes to produce safety, and keep them up to date on our scientific research, not ours, UMD, but nationwide. We do a tremendous amount of research trying to limit foodborne pathogens in fresh produce.
Excellent. So we're going to talk all about food safety and food safety tips, but we're going to kind of change that focus from the farmer producer to the home gardener who might be growing for themselves and their family and friends. But before we dive into that, we had you, Carol, way back on episode 15, and we talked about orchids and insects and hummingbirds with you, and that was June 2020. In the middle of the pandemic. I think we had just gotten out of the shutdown, home shutdown. Maybe we were exploring outside a little bit more at that point. But for those who listened back at that episode, we gave Carol's background, and we'll link to that in this episode. But we wanted to find out what's been going on with you since June 2020.
Well, Kathy, as you may know, I am an avid gardener. And though I don't have enough sun to really be able to produce vegetables, I'm heavy into azaleas, perennials, both native and non, heavy into just running around, finding that little sunspot in my garden where I can plant. And I opened up a new section, probably 100 feet by 100 feet, which had, because of the derecho 11 years ago, remember the derecho? So it was the last part of my house surround to have a financial investment in it and clear it out of just fallen trees and vines and all that other stuff. So I've got a new perennial shrub garden right now. So, with this drought, I'm just sitting there going, hose, water, looking for rain, watching that rain gauge, and drat it all, the local groundhog has found me. So I was out there. I'm out there with the repellents, and I've got one of my trail cams on that garden because I want to find out who's eating what. And I
Mm.
do have a wonderful family of foxes, but they're falling down on the job because that groundhog is driving me crazy.
Well, good luck with the groundhog. Other than fencing, perimeter, there's maybe you do have cats. I know that, Carol. So I've heard that one of the things that groundhogs hate is the smell of cat urine. Have you tried a little bit of used kitty litter?
No, but that's an idea, and I did use in a previous groundhog infestation or advance. I did put cat feces down their burrow, but I don't know where this guy is coming from. If I can find his burrow, then I can do cat feces. The other thing I used, Kathy, was talk radio. The more obnoxious, the better, 24/7. But you see, I've got my fox, and I want my fox to be comfortable coming through the garden
Mm-hmm.
because, I have those bunny things too. So I'm in a quandary. But, I will try some cat feces scattered around because I can tell you the repellents are not working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say a little bit of that granular used cat litter, in
Yes.
maybe in discreet little bags. So when company comes, you can clean those out, those little drawstring bags. Maybe that might be something to try because it's not a smell that we love either, I'm going to say.
But I'm long on phlox, many different species of phlox in that garden. And he loves phlox. And he's getting into my monarda. And oh yeah, he's irritating the heck out of me.
It sounds like a worthy adversary, Carol. So let's talk about our subject of the episode, food safety. And so this is going to be mostly on what we're growing for ourselves, maybe in a home plot, maybe a community garden. And so our first topic will be what vegetables and fruits we can eat fresh, because I know I'm the type of gardener, Carol, when I go over to my community garden plot, I'm just picking right off the tomato plant or digging it out of the ground, and I might just kind of rub it off on my shirt and then eat it. And same thing with okra and other things. I just like to eat it. It's almost more for the thirst out in the garden than anything. Yeah. And I figure, the rain has washed it away. So same thing when I'm picking fruit or service berries off the tree. I'm not coming in and putting them in a colander and rinsing them or anything. I'm just going to eat them out of hand. What do you think about that?
Well, okay. So understand I'm working with farmers who have a greater distribution impact than the home gardener. Mm-hmm. But I do know that human pathogens can cause some pretty nasty gastrointestinal upset. And, that little bit of issue that you might have been not so much from the service berries. I don't worry about that. But, if you pulled that carrot out of the ground, wiped it off on your jeans, where have your jeans been? And you ate that. And then, 24 hours later, you've got that little bit of tummy upset. Might have been the issue right there.
Yeah, I would say not so much with root vegetables. I would, most people they might snap off a few beans or something else and eat it out of hand. But I would think most people are going to come home and clean off a root vegetable first.
I don't know. I eat asparagus.
Mm-hmm.
And it never makes it to the kitchen, and it's pretty close to the ground.
Yeah, but you're going to snap it off, and you're not eating it what's underground at that point.
No, I just wipe that part off on my jeans.
So what should we be doing?
Well, it's if you're going to eat out of your garden, and particularly where your garden is, I worry about hydrocarbons, and that's air pollution, but that's another whole talk. Be careful of your inputs. You want to, if you're using composts or manures, you want to make sure that they are fully composted, that there is no chance of, they're not sprouting up weed seeds. If your compost is sprouting up weed seeds, it did not get hot enough to kill any possible human pathogens. If you're using post-consumer vegetative waste, this is a real issue because human saliva carries pathogens, of course. All of our animal manures are going to carry those human pathogens like E. coli that we worry about. So fully composting, great. If the compost or the manure is not fully processed, then you're inoculating your soil with more human pathogens. And now I get worried because we have rain splash. That raindrop hits the ground with sufficient velocity to hit the ground, pick up some dirt and other things, and carry it 5 feet, which includes, the tomatoes. And it transfers that possible contaminated dirt up onto your fruit.
Now, you mentioned one term, I think it was post-consumer vegetative waste. So can you define that?
So that's plate scrapings. And there's a big push to minimize food waste. And if it's pre-consumer vegetative waste, hey, that's the stuff we pick up off of out of our garden. It's the weeds and the whatnot. I don't worry about that.
And that might be like when you buy corn on the cob, the husks, and chop them up, or it might be the outer leaves of the lettuce that you peel off, and those go straight out into your compost.
Exactly. But if it's been on somebody's plate and they've drooled on it, then you've got contamination with human pathogens.
Okay, so if you wanted to compost the rest of your kids' veggie plate that they didn't finish or anything like that, then you want to be a little concerned about it.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you do temperatures and turns. You want that internal temperature to be between 131 degrees and 171 degrees. And you kind of want to go at it and make sure that your carbon-nitrogen balance, your greens and browns, balance really well. So you've got active composting, and you've got those heat-loving microbes breaking things down, giving off heat, and killing any possible human pathogens.
And do you think that home gardeners' compost piles really get that hot? Maybe those tumbler bins, where it's off the ground and you're rotating it and they're getting the heat of the sun on it. But sometimes people put their compost pile in a shady spot.
It's not so much sun or shade, Kathy. It's actually the microbes that are breaking down the organic matter are producing heat. So that doesn't matter sun or shade. That's going to be, are your greens and browns adequately balanced? Is it well oxygenated? Is it appropriately moistened? Are you turning it so the outside edge gets brought into the center where the microbes can create the heat to kill the pathogens? So sunshade doesn't matter. Your tumbler is fine. Your pile is fine. But you need to ask Santa Claus for a thermometer, a soil thermometer. So you make sure that the internal part of your pile is getting between that magic spread, 131 to 170 degrees.
And if
for 5 days.
Oh, sorry to interrupt you.
No, say, 5 days.
For 5 days at that temperature. And so it's really cooking, so to speak. And so if I'm not making my own compost, or my own compost is taking forever, and I go buy store-bought compost, what am I looking for, like on the bag? What should it say?
Oh, wow. There's so many products out there, and this gets a little difficult. So I think the best way to go about it is to use the National Organic Standard 90-120-day rule. And this is if you have any questions about your compost, or let's say somebody says, hey, I've got this pile from cleaning my chicken coop and it's from last year. It's just been sitting here. Do you want it? Well, we don't know that static pile of chicken manure and bedding has gotten hot enough to kill human pathogens. So if we apply it to our zinnias, all right, that we're not eating zinnias, or if we apply it to a crop like pumpkins or winter squash, which we're going to cook that, we've got a kill step, then boy, go for it. That's fine. But you don't want to use it as a side dressing for your greens, because you might eat those raw. I know I eat kale raw, all kinds of Swiss chard, I'll eat raw. And it's those from the garden straight into the mouth without a kill step. That's where you want to, if there's any question about your compost or your manure, you don't want to side dress that while that's growing.
Good point. So let's define kill step. So that sounds to me like I'm going to steam or cook the heck out of this vegetable.
You don't have to cook the heck out of it. It can be al dente, but you certainly want to get it in hot water. So a kill step is certainly going to be cooking of any kind, and that's include blanching. So if you're blanching to freeze, that's one of the things that you're doing, is you're killing any of those microbes that might be on the outside of your vegetables. But kill step can be fermentation. It can be jams. It can be pickling. Problem with dehydration is you may not get the temperatures high enough. So you want to check on that. So it's any process where you will kill any human microbes, human pathogens.
And so say I want to dehydrate some sun gold cherry tomatoes. Should I be cleaning them in a water and vinegar solution before I do that, or what would you recommend?
Well, vinegar doesn't do squat, so forget about that. All right, so if you want to do, so generally our rule of thumb is just rinse your vegetables really, really well. On your sun golds, your problem might come if they're cracked, Kathy. If they're cracked, that means that you've got exposure to the inside flesh. And we know that salmonella in particular can get inside the flesh of a vegetable and have a field day. It's multiplying in there. It's having a good time. So those cracked tomatoes, you want to use a kill step with those. Your dehydrator, make sure you follow their directions and you get the right temperatures to be able to kill any microbes. Vinegar doesn't do anything. I'm sorry. So wash it, just wash it with plain water. And then use your dehydrator according to directions.
Great. So let's talk a little bit about those cracked tomatoes, because Carol, my frugalness doesn't let me discard or compost those. I usually just cut around. So if there's like a blemish or it's dropped on the ground and it's a little bruised or whatever, or maybe there was a little insect bite or somebody took a bite on one side of the tomato, I just cut that part off and eat the rest.
Don't invite me over for salad. No, seriously,
Yeah.
we know from science-based studies and all of the food safety that I do is all science-based. So I don't say anything that I don't have studies, documented, peer-reviewed studies behind. And we know that microbes can get into the flesh of the tomato, particularly, and multiply. So your crack allows, that's wounding, that allows those microbes in. And I would much rather that you, cut around it, but make salsa out of it, okay? Cook it. Have it go through a kill step.
Good advice. All right, so let's move on to the water we use in our garden. So most of us are on municipal lines. Some of us might be on a well. Some of us might be dipping into a pond or rain barrel. So let's talk about the safety of some of those water sources.
So your municipal water already contains a sanitizer. So you're doing pretty good. Where you want to be careful is you want to check all of your hose connections from the main to your distribution point, okay? In other words, your regulator. If your hoses leak, that is an opening in the line that can admit, all right, we can get human pathogens coming into your hose. So check your distribution system. Make sure that you don't have any leaks. And municipal water is pretty darn good because of that sanitizer. Now, if you go to a well, hopefully if you've got a well like on your farm or on your garden, you're going to have that well tested. Again, we use E. coli as an indicator organism because all warm-blooded animals, their gut contains E. coli, and E. coli is a good, relatively inexpensive test that you can have done on your water. If you've got house water, hopefully you had the health department check it out and test it. And if you haven't, like my well, oh my gosh, I don't even want to think about when I've had my well tested. It's been decades. Okay, I need to get off my butt and I need to get my water tested because the casing can crack, the wellhead can get tipsy, the sanitary seal can get, moribund. I can lose the bolts that hold it down. In other words, I can get contamination into my well. And I'm sitting here going, la-di-da, everything is fine. So if you haven't had your well tested in a while, you might think about doing that. If you're growing a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables that are typically eaten raw, and that water touches that surface. Definitely if it's coming into your kitchen, so have your well tested. Now, if you're talking about a source of water that's open to the environment, like a pond, okay, we've got to figure that you're going to have contamination in that water. So you can do things like, Kathy, you can use drip tape so that the water does not touch the edible portion of the crop. So if you've got your row of kale and you've got your drip tape right next to the stalk, you're fine. When you harvest, make sure that you're not muddying up the edible portion of the crop with the dirt. All right, keep that separation. Rain barrels are the one things that I think people get really kind of like complacent. Well, that's surface water. That's been exposed to the environment. And if it ran over your roof or the roof of your greenhouse, it's picked up all kinds of contagion. So consider that to be surface water, should not touch the edible portion of the crop during the growing season. So keep that, especially near harvest. Not near harvest. I mean, seedlings and stuff, I'm not going to worry about it. You can overhead water that. But when you start getting close to harvest, that's when we've got a little red flag on the play. And we say, well, that water could be contaminated.
Yeah, and I would say my practice is just the pond or rain barrel water. That's for non-edible items. So that's for your perennials, shrubs, etc., your annual containers. But yeah, if you're going to put it on your herbs or vegetable garden, then I would be a little more cautious.
You can use your drip tape, and you're fine, until it springs a leak because the bunny decided to take a drink, which happens. And you can use an overhead application of, let's say, I don't want to call it questionable water, but surface water, and you can apply a 4 to 5 day sun exposure, and anything that might be in that water, you have a really good chance of reducing the population just through environmental conditions and UV exposure between overhead watering and harvest.
Okay. And what about non-potable water? So our community garden has a cistern and we get it straight off the fire hydrant. So it's not the water that's kind of coming out of your tap for drinking water.
So it doesn't have a sanitizer, maybe? Okay. I would treat it like it was surface water and have that just not on the edible portion of the crop.
Okay. I will warn my fellow community gardeners because I believe, there's a lot of overhead watering going on.
Of course there is.
And just because, it's tough to haul that water to the plots and get it out of the cistern, which brings up the topic of hoses, because some people do hook up a hose to the cistern and try to snake it down to their plot. And we have a giant sign that says it's non-potable water, do not drink it. But I wouldn't think anybody in our community garden is drinking out of a hose, but I do know home gardeners who, you're out there, you're hot and sweaty. It's tempting to drink out of the hose. Is that safe or not?
Well, it depends on your hose. So there is food safe hoses. They're more expensive, and you still want to keep it out of the sunlight because you don't want that material degrading. Natural rubber hoses contain few to no toxins that could be released. So it's the toxins in the plastics, the material that can come into your water source. Lead is the big one, but there's a whole bunch of long, monosyllabled words of toxins that I can't pronounce unless they're in front of me. And that's what we're trying to avoid. That's why we don't want to drink out of a hose. So you can get food grade hoses, natural rubber hoses. Keep them protected, keep them in the shade, don't let them bake in the sun. Make sure there's no leaky connections where you can get possible contamination into the hose. And it always is, it's kind of safe to let your hose exhaust before you put it, like if you're watering your lettuces overhead, because you're in a hurry, all right? You're just going to take that hose and you're just going to water those lettuces. If you can let it run for a few minutes and clear the hose, then I know that that's going to be cleaner water. And of course, the scientist in me wants to know what element in that fire hydrant water makes it non-potable, because Maryland potability standards, and you are in Maryland, include not only total coliforms. So has it been exposed to poop? We get to say poop a lot. We like that. Has, total coliforms has to be 0. Turbidity, which is the filminess of the water, that's suspended particles, has to be less than 10 NTUs, which is a measure of turbidity, and less than 10 milligrams per liter of nitrates, because nitrates can cause problems with babies and pregnant women. So why is that water not potable? What is it failing on?
I think it is the cistern storage end of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's that we're feeding it into 5,000 gallon cistern or larger, and then it's sitting. It's just sitting there, and we're not allowed to open the top except for to check and to load in the water, but like not open it up to the rainwater, say.
Got it.
And also that would obviously prevent mosquitoes from breeding inside. But usually we're going through, a cistern full every week or so, especially during the drought, maybe even more often. But it's never, ever fully drained below the spigot line, because there's a good 4 to 6 inches below that. So that's why I'm guessing they're labeling it not potable or non-potable. So because there's always going to be a certain amount sitting at the bottom.
Now, if you really want to get crazy, you actually can sanitize that water. So now the federal government hasn't quite figured out what the standards are 100% on sanitizing water, like say in a cistern. There is literature out there. You want to sanitize, you want to use a sanitizer such as, there's not talking today. Hydrogen peroxide in the right proportions, food grade chlorine in the right proportions, oxyacidic acid. I'm getting that word all messed up. So there are sanitizers that some of my farmers actually do stand by. If their irrigation source is a pond, and they know that if their water test shows that their E. coli, because again, that's that indicator organism that we use, gets above a certain number of colony forming units per 100 mLs, they might use a siphon to siphon in a certain amount of sanitizer. The federal government says that potable water has 0 E. coli. So it's actually not as stringent as Maryland state potability standards. So you could use a sanitizer, but you'd have to test the water,
And again, we'll just take all the precautions and know that it's non-potable for us for our use.
You.
Yeah. So let's turn to harvest time and what sanitation steps we should be taking. So we are out there weeding in the garden, watering, and then we turn to harvest. That's usually our last task, right, as we're leaving the garden and bringing it back. But shouldn't it be the first so your hands are clean at that point?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the clean hand thing, because you know where they've been. And I don't know about you, but one of the last things that I do before I leave the house is I give my kitty a pat on the head and say, Mommy's going to be back. Well, have animal cooties on your hand. You don't know where that cat has been. No, actually, you do know where that cat has been. So clean hands. Your harvest container should be cleaned and sanitized. It should never sit directly on the ground. Put a bucket down, put your harvest container on the bucket so you don't have direct soil contact. You don't want to put any produce in that bucket that has visible poop on it, no bird poop. If you have tomatoes or other fruit that has dropped, now not just grown on the ground, but has gone from an altitude and hit the ground, you want that to go in a coal bin, because you get micro fissures. You know that there's human pathogens such as E. coli in the soil, and now you've got those micro fissures and you've got human pathogens being exposed into the skin or into the flesh of the fruit. So you want to put those aside to make tomato sauce, all right? But don't eat them fresh.
Okay, so as long as you have what you call the kill step, those can still be used. And I have to laugh a little, Carol, at your bringing out the harvest container, because you know what my harvest container is? It's the pockets of whatever I have on, and or my own little hands is usually what I end up doing.
You mean those grubby things that have just been in the weeds?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah.
hear ya.
So then in that case, and I'm bringing home, what I picked with my bare, sweaty, whatever, dirty hands,
Yeah.
taking it home. How am I cleaning and sanitizing that before I'm eating it?
Okay, so this is one of those situations where an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we watch what our inputs are going into the garden, but bunnies come in, they poop. Birds fly overhead, they poop. All right, and we know that warm-blooded animals have human pathogens. We share those pathogens. So try to be as clean as possible on your inputs. Watch your manures, watch your compost, watch your water source, et cetera, et cetera. Then your harvest container should be. Kathy, do I have to buy you a little plastic basket?
No, I have so many beautiful baskets and trugs and things, but it's always what's at hand, and what's at hand is your pocket, right? You're busy, you're running to the garden, and you're like, oh, I'll just roll up the edge of my jeans and stick something in there.
Oh yeah, I roll up the edge of my t-shirt and makes a little pocket.
Exactly, that's your
so
pocket.
in my perfect world, I'd like you to use a cleaned and sanitized container. And then when you get it in the kitchen, just wash them off with water.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. We're done. Wash it off with water.
And that would be like a strong jet of water, or
just water?
Just water.
Just
enough
water.
to do that. And then what if it has visible soil chunks? Say I'm harvesting a root vegetable like the carrots we talked about earlier.
Well, but it's okay. And this is a little bit of a difficult issue. Hopefully your water, has no human pathogens in it. Your water source is good. Your soil, you have to figure, is going to have a certain amount of E. coli and other guys living in it. You're going to wash it and scrub it and peel it. And then in my perfect world, you might cook it.
Mm. Okay.
So because, you watch your inputs. That's the important thing. So scrub it and peel it.
So that would be for root vegetables like a potato or onion or something like that. But what about, say we have cucumbers, zucchini, squashes, anything that's sits on the soil? Maybe I'll put a piece of cardboard underneath or some straw, but it generally is sitting on the soil.
Yeah, and we know that most of those vegetables, you're going to have a kill step. If not, just take a soft brush and under running water, just scrub that surface. If it's really grody and it's zucchini, I might wash it and then peel it if I'm really going to be picky about it. Potatoes, I don't think you're going to eat raw potatoes. So we got a kill step there.
Mm-hmm.
A winter squash, you've got a kill step. When we get into the melons, okay. Yeah. Here, I'm a wild child. I still eat cantaloupe, but we know that netted skin has lots of little nooks and crannies for harborage. And that's where we can have our little E. coli and friends really kind of hanging out. So scrub them, a little soft brush, running water. And if you've got someone in your family that's particularly maybe compromised health, that you might take that step where they don't get that produce that might have some contamination. So maybe no cantaloupe for them. You can give it to me. I'll eat it.
Yeah. I sometimes wonder, and I also wonder about when people carve watermelons, say from the farmer's market or grocery store, and the knife pushing in through the skin, through the outer skin, isn't that pushing in some of the potential bacteria or microbes inside?
Oh, yeah, it is. Absolutely. So you want to probably do that soft brush and running water scrub on the skin of the watermelon. And again, if you've got immunocompromised, very old, very young people, who are particularly fragile in health, maybe you think twice. Mm-hmm. Me, I'm going to eat it. Like I say, I still eat cantaloupes. But just, scrub that skin off because, that knife is going to take whatever's on the outside, it's going to put it on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about herbs. So most of them are going to be leafy herbs, like our basil, say
Mm-hmm.
that or cilantro, and most of us we're probably going to pinch it off with our own little 2 fingers, thumb and forefingers off the plant while we're out there. Some of us maybe will take snips or small pruners, and I don't usually see people cleaning those in between gardening or doing anything else. What do you recommend? I keep a pair of kitchen scissors specifically just for cutting leafy greens, my lettuces, and my herbs. And I try to wash that, when I bring it back in.
So when we're talking about a food contact surface, that's going to be those snips or my jackknife. God knows where it's actually a grafting knife. My grafting knife, which lives in my pocket, we don't even want to think about all the places it's been. So in my perfect world, we would remove anything that visible soil, all right, organic matter or garden soil, rinse it. We would apply a detergent. What detergent? Anything that you use for your dishes is fine. Blue Dawn is really popular amongst the small farm set. You give it a good scrub, and actually the abrasion is part of it, because what you're doing is you're removing any biofilms. Biofilms are little colonies of bacteria, both good and bad, that hang together, have little orgies together, and form this protective long chain sugar coating on them so that they're difficult to wash off. You're scrubbing with the detergent, removes them, you rinse it, and then if you really, really want to be crazy, I would spray it with a sanitizer. So you could use a Tsunami or Sanidate or a food grade chlorine-based sanitizer. Use it according to the package directions. Not weaker, not stronger. Come on. Let it dry, and then you're ready to rock and roll for the next session.
So those food grade sanitizers you mentioned, would those be available to the home consumer?
Tractor Supply has a lot of them. Your restaurant supply houses have a lot of them, and you know you can get them on Amazon. Okay.
Just like everything, I guess.
Like everything.
So I'm going to ask you about a practice that I remember seeing on my grandfather's apple orchard as a child, which is people would pick an apple off the tree, a fresh apple, and then they would go, like breathe on it hard, and then rub it on their shirt, and then bite into it. And I was like, that's not cleaning it, but it makes it shiny.
It makes it shiny. Yeah.
Yeah. I
That's
always
all it
wondered
does.
why people did that.
And worse, if they're going to rub it up against their jeans and their shirt, did they just clean out the chicken coop? We don't know what's on their shirt, or maybe we think we do, which means I don't want it on the surface of my apple. So yeah, that's it brings out the wax in the apple, makes it shiny, makes it pretty, but it doesn't make it food grade safe.
No, so probably, the rubbing of it just makes you feel a little better.
That's right.
Like I just cleaned that one surface that maybe a bee landed on once.
I don't worry about bees. I worry about bigger critters.
Exactly. So other than the mammals we talked about that can spread, and birds that can obviously drop dew or land or peck your vegetables and fruits, what else can bring disease or other issues into a vegetable or fruit or herb garden?
That dratted groundhog, the nemesis, my nemesis, definitely deer. Oh dear. Yeah, pretty much it's going to be a warm-blooded animal. So, if you've got squirrels harvesting before you, there's a chance there. If the raccoons come through and sample your sweet corn, but generally you cook your sweet corn, so you got a kill step there. But if the raccoons are sampling your raspberries, or my dog loved to harvest raspberries, and he would all the raspberries within his reach, all the lower ones, he would take his little lips and he would test it. If it came free in his mouth, he ate it. If it didn't come free easily with his little lips, he moved on to the next one. So I knew in my raspberry patch, anything lower than 2 feet, that was the dog's. I didn't harvest those because I knew doggy breath had been on them.
But you could have, Carol, maybe picked them and done one of those kill steps, like making it into a jam.
Yep. You could have done that,
So if
but
you
you don't want to put it directly into your smoothie.
correct. So if you had small children or pets that you might suspect that they're, maybe they lick but don't eat, as you're
Mm-hmm.
describing, or breathe on or touch, then maybe you want to go through that extra step.
Yeah. And again, we are so kind of cavalier about our own gardens, and we think, well, we grew it. There's going to be no problem. This isn't like big agro businesses. They're microbes that we know and love. But when you bring in fresh inputs, new water source, surface water, compost, manures, that's when you're re-inoculating your home garden, and you want to kind of think twice about how you handle at harvest.
Well, I have to ask you about my favorite fertilizer for the vegetable garden, which is the fish emulsion fertilizer.
That has gone through a step, so that is safe to use.
Yay.
Now, out of the bottle, according to directions. But now, if you want to do the oxygenation enhancement thing on fish fertilizer, where you put an aerator in there and you put a little bit of molasses in it, or maybe you do that with dehydrated cow manure, you kind of supercharge it. You're supercharging all of the E. coli and the salmonella and anybody else human pathogen wise that's going to be in there. So that goes from an approved, safe fertilizer to a witch's brew.
Yeah, I could see how that could happen. And I would think similarly if you were doing compost tea.
Yeah.
So,
composting. Now, I'll say, if your water source is good, municipal, tested well, you've got no bacteria inputs from that, and your compost is fully processed, you've done the temperature, you've done the turns, everything is, it's good, yeah, you can use your manure tea. I still personally probably wouldn't put it on leafy greens. And part of the problem with leafy greens is they've got all that textured surface. So you get little bits of harborage, little bits of tiny bits of dirt in the creases. And even though you wash it, you may not wash it well enough. Oh, and whatever you do not fill your sink full of water and dunk. That's called sharing dirt. Oh. All right. You want to clean your vegetables under a stream of water, not in a basin.
So you're not soaking it, swishing it around.
Nope.
And then that. So what about a salad spinner?
Salad spinners are okay. I'd like you to clean and sanitize the surfaces between use.
So you would probably rinse off whatever greens or herbs or what you have for the salad spinner, and then use the spinner just for the drying, because I do see people use the salad spinner for the washing step as well.
And you could do that. What I would want to see is that is the entire inside of the salad spinner is a food contact surface. And in my perfect world, I have a lot of perfect worlds. I don't get them, but I ask for them. In my perfect world, you would separate the inner basket from the outer, and you would take off any visible soil, rinse it, add your Blue Dawn or your ivory liquid, scrub it up with a brush, and maybe you need a special little round brush to get in the nooks and crannies, rinse it off. And then maybe you keep a sanitizer for like your cutting board or your kitchen counter or something like that you routinely use that's ready-made. You've made the dilution, and you spray it, let it dry before your next use.
Okay. Well, in our last few minutes, since we've talked about other types of animal manure, we have to talk about the humankind, Carol. So there are still parts of the world, maybe even old school gardeners listening to this, who believe, what nutrients you take in your mouth, you leave in the garden. So they're using human manure, we'll just call it. And what do you advise for people who might be doing that, and or people who might be buying products from other countries that are grown in that?
Yeah, Kathy, that is a really good point. We call it night soil. That's the euphemistic word for human waste, night soil. And we know that there are some cultures where human waste is an important source of nutrients, I guess. And know those countries. when we get imported goods into this country, they should be labeled country of origin. That's by law. So we know that those countries where night soil might be a source of nutrients, that maybe we don't buy that product, or if we do buy that product, we use a kill step.
Mm-hmm. So it would be safe for certain things, like a root vegetable, like a potato that you're going to be growing.
Cook it.
Yeah, that you know you're going to cook it. But maybe if it was, say, peaches, not that, the peach tree would be that affected by night soil, but something maybe lettuce on the surface, that might be much more concern.
And I also think about handling. I mean, I'm a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I do go to my farm market. But I do go to the grocery store, and I know that, culturally, we like to handle produce before we buy it. And I can't say that the person who handled that bunch of celery before me has the kind of sanitary habits that I do. All right. So I'm definitely going to wash my produce. If it comes from the farm market, if it comes from the grocery store, I'm going to wash my produce. If it's an imported produce, the federal government actually works pretty hard trying to keep our imported produce clean and safe. But, just have to think about it, particularly if you have someone who is immunocompromised in your household.
Great point. So, Carol, as we're wrapping up here, how can our listeners contact you to find out more? Are they able, as a consumer, to sign up for your newsletter that's targeted at growers?
Wow, I'm flattered. Yes, you certainly can. We have our group has a website, and you should have told me to remember it. So if you Google produce safety UMD, that should pop up our website. You might have to go to a tab extension and then down to produce safety, or you can reach me on my work email, which is callen12@umd.edu. And I do speak to garden clubs, and I do speak to master gardeners. I've taught AmeriCorps students, because food safety impacts everybody. And I think, again, knowledge is a good thing to spread around.
Great. And we'll put a link to that newsletter and the food safety site as well in our show notes, Carol.
That sounds great.
Any final advice for the home food grower?
Just wash your produce. Just
All right.
wash your produce.
Thank you, Carol.
You're very welcome, Kathy.
Acanthus plant profile. Bear's breeches, Acanthus mollis, is a perennial plant with large leaves and tall flower spikes. It is native to southern Europe and northern Africa. It's also known as bear's breeches, oyster plant, and sea dock. Acanthus leaves are deeply lobed, and some have a spiny edge to them. The Corinthian leaf motif in ancient Greek and Roman architecture is modeled after this dramatic foliage. The snapdragon-like flowers are arranged along a central stem and bloom from spring to midsummer. The plant can get to 6 feet tall when in bloom. It is 3 feet wide and high without the flower spike. It is hardy to USDA zones 7 to 10. Put extra mulch around its base in winter if you are in a marginal zone. Acanthus grows well in full to part sun in well-draining soils. It is deer and rabbit resistant. It can be propagated by division or started from seed. It can be an aggressive spreader and is hard to dig up once established, so be sure of its chosen location before you plant it. Acanthus mollis, you can grow that. What's new in the garden this week? Well, the heat wave has finally broken. I'm enjoying the blooms of my black-eyed Susan and the scent of the blooming gardenia I have potted by my back door. Over at the community garden plot, We've sampled our first Sun Gold tomatoes, and I'm making more batches of pesto from our basil. In the garden tips that we shared this week on our social media, we offered more tomato growing tips and also started a week of propagation tips. So check those out by following us at WDC Gardener or on our Facebook page, Washington Gardener Magazine, or by joining our Washington Gardener Google group. The embroidered patches have arrived for the GardenDC podcast, and I think they are so cute. I've already added one to my own patch collection jacket. You can get yours by being a supporter of the GardenDC podcast for as little as 99 cents a month. Just see the link in our show notes for the GardenDC support. And once you fill out a support form, send an email to me, kathyjentz at gmail.com with your mailing address, and I'll send you out the patch. In local gardening events that you might want to attend, I'd love to invite you to our garden photo show opening reception, and that's for our 18th annual Washington Gardener Photo Contest winners at Meadowbrook Botanical Gardens in Vienna, Virginia. That takes place Sunday, August 4th from 2 to 3:30 p.m. and will be in the Meadowlark Visitor Center lobby area. Also, I'd love to invite you to see me at Patuxent Nursery in Bowie, Maryland on September 8th from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm giving a talk on my book, Groundcover Revolution, along with a book signing. You can find out more about that at patuxentnursery.com, where you can sign up for the event. It is free to attend the talk, but if you'd like to purchase a book, you can do so through the nursery's registration site. Happy gardening!
In the book, The Urban Garden by Kathy Jentz and Teri Speight, you'll find dozens of inspiring and creative ways to grow flowers, shrubs, vegetables, herbs, and other plants in small spaces and with a limited budget. Whether you want to grow on a balcony, rooftop, front stoop, or a tiny urban patio, turn your growing dreams into reality and build a gorgeous and unique garden that showcases your personal style while still being functional and productive. With the genius ideas and resourceful tactics found here, you'll be maximizing yields and beauty from every square inch of your space. No matter what you grow, the 101 amazing growing ideas found in the urban garden will turn your tiny urban yard into a treasure trove of green you'll be proud to share with family and friends. Buy your copy today at your local retail bookseller or order it online now at amazon.com or bookshop.org. Get low-maintenance alternatives to lawns with Groundcover Revolution by Kathy Jentz. Reducing the lawn is among the biggest trends in homeownership, with an endless stream of homeowners looking for an eco-friendly alternative to a traditional turfgrass lawn. In the last few years alone, over 23 million Americans converted part of their lawn to a natural landscape, and now they're looking to do even more. The biggest challenge to adopting this new ideal of the perfect lawn? Knowing how and when to replace your turf and which plants are the best ones for the job. Groundcover Revolution is here with all the answers you need, and some you didn't even know you needed. Included are 40 in-depth profiles of plants that are perfect choices for replacing a grass lawn. There are options for sun, for shade, for dry and wet sites, and for various climates around the globe. There are choices that bloom, options that are evergreen, and selections that are deer-resistant. Kathy Jentz has also included an incredibly useful chart that gives you all the specifics on each of the 40 choices for quick reference and to make your ground cover selection process even easier. Whether you want to replace the entire lawn or just reduce the amount of land dedicated to turf, Groundcover Revolution will help you usher in a new and improved idea of what a beautiful lawn should be. Groundcover Revolution is available now wherever you buy books, including Amazon.com and bookshop.org.
This is Christy Page with Food Gardening Network on 5 Most Important Ways Not to Kill Your Blueberries, an article by Amanda MacArthur. Many years ago, when we first bought our current home, I decided to take the plunge and plant some blueberry bushes in my backyard. My main motivation was simply a love for blueberries and a desire to grow my own. Despite my lack of knowledge about growing blueberries, I embarked on this journey figuring that everyone has to start somewhere, right? I started by doing the obvious, looking for the best tasting blueberries you can grow. However, in the end, I didn't choose based on flavor alone. Instead, I discovered a reputable dealer called True Vine Ranch that specialized solely in blueberries. I figured if they could focus exclusively on blueberries, they must be experts in their fields. I took advantage of a sale they were offering for 4 2 to 3 foot tall blueberry plants which claimed to produce berries throughout the entire season. The package included 1 plant, each of the following varieties: Recca, an early season, Blue Crop, a mid-season, and Liberty, a late season, and Elliott, a very late season. I learned that blueberry bushes require cross-pollination and thrive when planted alongside different varieties, so this assortment sounded perfect to me. I have to say, growing blueberries with these 4 plants has been incredibly effortless, and I'm definitely a fan of this approach. Although I can't recall which specific bush is which, I have one particularly fruitful plant that yields huge, delicious berries that our family adores. In fact, my daughter has declared that she'll never eat a grocery store blueberry again and will only consume the ones from our backyard, and I can't argue with that. Let me tell you, though, it's been a wild ride. My berries have been growing like nobody's business, and I've been lucky enough to keep the birds from gobbling them all up. But before I struck gold with my blueberry bounty, I did my homework to learn how to maximize my yield each season. TrueVine also offered great tips. Let me share some of the common problems blueberry growers face and how you can tackle them head-on, because growing blueberries can be an absolute delight, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. These tasty little fruits can be a bit finicky when it comes to their growing conditions. If you want to avoid a blueberry disaster, you've got to keep an eye out for a few key things. First, blueberries need acidic soil, or else. They are the divas of the fruit world. They demand acidic soil with a pH between 4.5 and 5.5. If your soil isn't quite up to their standards, your plants might throw a tantrum and refuse to grow or produce fruit. Second, yellow leaves and puny berries are from nutrient deficiencies. Berries are hungry little creatures and need a balanced diet of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and a bunch of other micronutrients. If they're not getting enough of these essential vitamins and minerals, you might notice some yellowing leaves, stunted growth, or puny fruits. Number 3, netting and a close eye to keep the bugs and the birds out. Bugs, birds, and all sorts of creepy crawlies want a piece of your blueberry action. And while nasty diseases like powdery mildew and root rot can really rain on your blueberry parade, to keep the birds at bay, try covering your bushes with some stylish netting or hanging up some shiny reflective bird deterrents. Number 4, if you want berries, give your plants a breather. Now, speaking of pruning, you've got to give your blueberry bushes a yearly haircut. It's a must for keeping them looking and producing their best. Aim to prune in late winter or early spring before those new leaves start popping out. 5, don't let your berries get parched. Last but not least, don't forget about water and mulch. Blueberries have pretty shallow roots, so they need a constant supply of moisture to keep those berries plump and juicy. Make sure to give them a drape regularly, especially when the fruits are developing. And to really pamper your plants, spread a nice layer of organic mulch around their base. Now, in my experience, I found my plants to be fairly tolerant after several years, but those first few years we did baby them quite a bit with lots of water and peat moss. So there you have it, folks, the inside scoop on keeping your blueberry patch in tip-top shape. This has been the last word on blueberries and how to take care of them with Christy Page at foodgardening.com.
Thank you for listening to GardenDC. You can become a listener supporter for as little as 99 cents a month by going to the supporter link in our show notes or directly to podcasters.spotify.com/pod/show/GardenDC/support. Another way to support this podcast is to subscribe to our monthly digital publication, Washington Gardener Magazine, To do so, go to WashingtonGardener.com or WashingtonGardener.blogspot.com. You can find Washington Gardener on social media at WDC Gardener on Twitter or X, Instagram, and Pinterest, and on Facebook at Washington Gardener Magazine. And be sure to leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Please take a minute to share us on social media with hashtag GardenDC so other gardeners can find us too.